Conor McGregor, the bus attack. Conor McGregor was the UFC's golden goose, their biggest star who transformed the sport into a mainstream phenomenon. But in April 2018, the Irishman crossed a line that nearly ended his UFC career. After Khabib Nurmagomedov confronted McGregor's teammate Artem Lobov at a hotel, Conor flew from Ireland to Brooklyn with his entourage seeking revenge. What happened next was chaos. McGregor attacked a bus full of fighters, throwing a dolly through the window that injured Michael Chiesa and Ray Borg, forcing them off the UFC 223 card. The footage went viral instantly. McGregor was arrested, charged with assault, and Dana White was absolutely livid. This is the most disgusting thing that has ever happened in the history of the company. Many believe McGregor's UFC career was over. Dana fumed. Would you want to be in business with Conor McGregor right now? I don't think anybody's going to want to right now. But money talks. Despite the criminal charges and Dana's outrage, McGregor was back in the octagon just 6 months later, headlining the biggest pay-per-view of the year against Khabib. While McGregor wasn't technically kicked out, his temporary exile shows the double standard in the UFC. Any other fighter would have been permanently banned, but McGregor's star power earned him a pass that others could only dream of. Nate Diaz, the vape pen incident. Nate Diaz's relationship with the UFC was always complicated. The Stockton bad boy marched to his own beat, refusing to play the corporate game that Dana White expected from his fighters. After losing a close decision to Conor McGregor in their rematch at UFC 202, Diaz appeared at the post-fight press conference vaping CBD oil. This was 2016, when CBD was still on USADA's prohibited list during competition periods, which extended until 6 hours after a fight. The UFC and USADA were furious. Diaz had openly flouted the rules on camera, creating a public relations nightmare. While he ultimately received only a warning, the incident marked the beginning of the end for Diaz in the UFC. Over the next several years, Diaz and the UFC engaged in a cold war. The promotion kept offering him fights that he didn't want, while Diaz demanded money they couldn't pay. He sat out for 3 years, effectively frozen out of competition. Dana repeatedly criticized Diaz in the media. Nate Diaz turns down every fight we offer him. Then he goes on social media claiming we're not offering him fights. It's ridiculous. When Diaz finally fought out his contract in 2022, the split was inevitable. He left the UFC on his own terms. The years of being sidelined amounted to a de facto expulsion from the promotion he helped build. If you're enjoying this breakdown of UFC fighters' expulsions, hit like and subscribe for more MMA history. 3. Ronda Rousey, the silent exit. Ronda Rousey wasn't technically kicked out of the UFC, but her exit tells a fascinating story about how quickly the promotion will move on from even their biggest stars. Rousey was the UFC's first female superstar, a dominant champion who transcended the sport with movie roles, magazine covers, and mainstream fame. Dana White, who once claimed women would never fight in the UFC, changed his tune completely. Ronda Rousey's the biggest star we've ever had. Then came the fall. After her shocking knockout loss to Holly Holm in 2015, Rousey disappeared from public view. When she returned a year later against Amanda Nunes, she suffered an even more brutal 48-second destruction. Rousey never officially retired from MMA, but the UFC didn't fight to keep her. Despite her star power, Dana quickly pivoted to new champions. Behind the scenes, sources say Rousey felt abandoned by the promotion that had built her up as invincible. Dana's tone changed dramatically. I don't think she'll fight again. She's made a lot of money, and I think she's going to ride off into the sunset and start living her life. The UFC, which had once centered entire marketing campaigns around Rousey, erased her from their promotional materials almost overnight. No farewell fight, no retirement ceremony, no acknowledgement of her groundbreaking contributions. Rousey's story reveals how disposable even the biggest stars are in the UFC's eyes. One day you're the face of the company, the next, you're yesterday's news. 4. Chris Cyborg, the Dana feud. Chris Cyborg was one of the most dominant female fighters in MMA history, but her UFC tenure was marked by a bitter personal feud with Dana White that eventually led her to exit. The tension began years before Cyborg even joined the UFC, with Dana making derogatory comments about her appearance. She looks like Wanderlei Silva in a dress. These remarks, which mocked her for her physical appearance, set the tone for their relationship. Once in the UFC, Cyborg became featherweight champion and seemed unstoppable. Behind the scenes, she was battling the promotion over weight classes, pay, and respect. The breaking point came after her win over Felicia Spencer in 2019. Dana publicly claimed Cyborg was afraid to rematch Amanda Nunes. Cyborg responded by posting a video showing Dana backstage. The UFC released an edited version that changed the context of their interaction. When Cyborg called out this manipulation, Dana went nuclear. "I'm done with Cyborg. I'm not dealing with her anymore. We're out of the Cyborg business," Dana announced, letting her contract expire despite her champion status and drawing power. Cyborg signed with Bellator, where she immediately became champion. She later revealed, "I was bullied by Dana White for years. He damaged my brand, made it harder for me to find sponsors, and created a hostile work environment. Her exit exposed how personal vendettas can override business sense in the UFC, even when it means losing a legendary champion. 5. Tito Ortiz, the company man turned enemy. Tito Ortiz was the UFC's first real superstar, a light heavyweight champion whose charisma and fighting style helped save the promotion when it was on the brink of bankruptcy. But his relationship with Dana White became one of the most bitter feuds in UFC history. Bad blood started when Dana, formerly Tito's manager, became UFC president. Power dynamics shifted and Tito began demanding more money as the company's biggest draw. Dana took this as a personal betrayal. Their feud escalated to absurd levels, with Dana and Tito agreeing to an actual boxing match in 2007. Tito pulled out, claiming Dana had never been professionally tested. The damage was done. Their business relationship was now irreparably personal. After years of public insults, contract disputes, and Dana calling Tito the dumbest human being I've ever met, Ortiz was effectively pushed out of the UFC in 2012. He briefly returned in 2014 for a final run before being shown the door again. Dana didn't mince words. I've personally disliked Tito for many years. I'm happy I don't have to be in business with him anymore. Ortiz's exile shows how the UFC, and Dana specifically, often can't separate business from personal feelings. Despite Tito's drawing power and historical importance, his willingness to challenge Dana's authority made him expendable. 6. Francis Ngannou, the champion who walked away. Francis Ngannou represents perhaps the most significant expulsion in modern UFC history. A reigning heavyweight champion who chose to leave rather than accept the UFC's terms. The Cameroonian knockout artist had become one of the promotion's most fearsome champions. Behind the scenes, he was fighting for more than just opponents. Ngannou wanted better pay, healthcare for fighters, and the freedom to pursue boxing opportunities. Dana White and the UFC refused to budge. After Ngannou defended his title against Cyril Gane in January 22, negotiations reached an impasse. Rather than accept what Dana called the biggest contract for a heavyweight in UFC history, Ngannou did the unthinkable. He vacated his title and walked away. Dana's response was dismissive. We offered Francis a deal that would have made him the highest paid heavyweight in company history. He didn't want the deal. We're going to move on. Behind the scenes, sources say Dana was furious that a champion would dare leave on his own terms. UFC quickly created an interim title and tried to erase Ngannou from their promotional materials. Ngannou signed with the PFL for a groundbreaking deal that included equity in the company and the freedom to box. His exit exposed the UFC's restrictive contracts and showed that even champions aren't immune to being pushed out when they demand more rights. 7. Anderson Silva, the legend's unceremonious exit. Anderson Silva was the greatest champion in UFC history, holding the middleweight title for nearly 7 years with 16 consecutive wins. His Matrix-like striking and dominant reign made him a legend, with Dana White repeatedly calling him the greatest of all time. But Silva's exit from the UFC revealed how quickly legends can fall from grace. After losing his title to Chris Weidman in 2013, Silva suffered a horrific leg break in their rematch. His return from injury was marked by failed drug tests, declining performances, and a shadow of his former greatness. By 2020, the 45-year-old Silva was on a 3-fight losing streak when he faced Uriah Hall. After another defeat, Dana was unusually harsh. He's a legend of this sport, a legend of this company, but I want him to retire. I don't want to match him with anyone else. Despite Silva expressing interest in fighting out his contract, Dana unilaterally announced that this was his last fight in the UFC. It will not happen again. The UFC released Silva without a farewell tour, tribute video, or the respect typically afforded to legends. He was simply cut, with Dana claiming it was for Silva's own good. Silva went on to find success in boxing, defeating former champion Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and knocking out Tito Ortiz, proving he still had fight left in him. His unceremonious exit showed that in the UFC, even the greatest of all time can be discarded when they're no longer valuable to the brand. And 8. John Jones, the troubled genius. John Jones has the unique distinction of being kicked out of the UFC multiple times without ever actually being released. His story is one of incredible talent repeatedly undermined by self-destructive behavior. Jones became the youngest champion in UFC history at age 23, displaying skills that made him seem unbeatable. But outside the cage, his life was chaos. In 2015, he was involved in a hit-and-run accident with a pregnant woman, fleeing the scene and leaving behind marijuana and cash in his car. The UFC stripped him of his title and suspended him indefinitely. They didn't hold back. He might be the biggest waste of talent in all of sports history. Jones returned a year later only to fail a drug test before UFC 200, causing the cancellation of a major headlining fight. Dana was furious. I'm not even mad, I'm just disappointed. After another failed drug test following his knockout of Daniel Cormier in 2017, Jones was stripped of his title again and faced a potential 4-year suspension. Many believed his UFC career was over, yet each time Jones eventually returned. Despite Dana calling him unfixable and the biggest screw-up in UFC history, Jones' transcendent talent always earned him another chance. His story represents the UFC's ultimate double standard, a fighter too talented to cut permanently but too unreliable to fully embrace. Jones remains in a perpetual cycle of exile and return, showing that for certain stars, there's no behavior too problematic if you're skilled enough in the octagon. From McGregor's bus attacks to Ngannou walking away as champion, these stories reveal the complex power dynamics that govern the UFC. Some fighters get infinite chances despite criminal behavior, while others are shown the door for challenging the promotion's business practices. What's clear is that the UFC operates with a sliding scale of justice. The more money you make for Dana White, the more leeway you receive. Principles often take a backseat to profit, and personal feuds can override business sense. As the UFC continues its global expansion, these stories serve as cautionary tales for fighters about the true cost of crossing the boss. In this sport, your career is always one controversy away from ending, unless, of course, you sell enough pay-per-views. If you enjoyed this breakdown, check out my video on UFC's most controversial decisions. Until next time, remember, in the fight game, the most dangerous opponent is sometimes the promotion itself.